Welcome, everybody, to yet another episode of Voices of Influence. Today, we're continuing to talk about the topic of social selling and personal brand building. And today, to talk about this topic with us, we have Angelo Ponzi with us. He is a marketing expert with several years of experience in the field of marketing. Welcome to our show, Angelo.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Um, you were kind. You said just several years of experience, as opposed to a few decades worth of experience.
Sure. I mean, a few decades worth of experience is like it's part of several years, I suppose. But definitely a few decades of experience for sure. um, so maybe you can actually give our audience a little bit of your background, Angelo, and tell us a bit about your journey into the world of marketing, these several decades of experience over here, and maybe with a little bit more focusing on what you're doing right now with craft.
Yeah, I'll try to give you the short version because it does. It does take a little bit. But I started off in the advertising agency business,
Okay.
and that's kind of where I cut my teeth. I worked for an international agency, and then went on to do a couple smaller agencies. Um, at one point in time, I was pulled away by my client, so I went in house. My first in house was director of advertising. Then I went up to director of marketing, and went back to the agency world, and I went to consulting. And I was a consultant for agencies, and then eventually left that and started my own agency. I grew it. I sold it. I spent 13 years in the action sports industry. Then I went back client side again for about 3 years. And then a little over 10 years ago, I decided that I was like working for myself, and started the fractional business. And really that journey of the agency business allowed me to work with local clients, small clients, big clients, global clients, but also in growing my own, everything from startups with no money to
Right.
decent sized budget. So I learned how to maneuver based on the needs of the client, and then certainly growing my own business. I took probably the same journey a lot of entrepreneurs take, in a sense of you start off with a great idea, you realize it's not as easy as you think, right? I call it the
Hmm.
field of dreams syndrome. Build it and they will come. Well, it doesn't work that way, and hope is not a strategy. So, you learn to start maneuvering and positioning and how you talk, and ultimately, um, nobody knows who you are. Then there's no referrals, there's no contact. Hence the kind of the social selling, and being very active in
Right.
promoting to build awareness, because you just never know when somebody's going to decide they need you, and
Right.
if they can't find you, they're going to find somebody else.
I love it. I think the this is great that like you walked us through like the whole range of things that you have done in this world of marketing, which also means that like you've probably seen so many like techniques and so many technologies like come into fore and like then go away, and there's been like a spectrum of this. So with that all in context, maybe I'll sort of kick off this idea of the power of social selling. And so like maybe tell us a little bit more about like how you see social selling right now.
Well, for me, I mean, you can't ignore the digital world. It just, as much as you might not want to invest, and I call marketing investments in marketing, not marketing as expenses. And I think of companies and people like myself think of it that way. It's about investing in our future, investing in your company's future. And so there's a lot of kind of techniques, but you have to understand where your audience is. And
Right.
we're going to fish where the fish are, in a sense. And for me, that's, with my business, that's LinkedIn. And
Mm,
so to sign up and have a LinkedIn account and don't do anything is
mm,
useless. So you have to, and I had to, and exactly what I do. I drink my own Kool-Aid. I have a very active program. I've had it for years. Um, I'm very aggressive in identifying, I'll call it posts and blogs and videos. So I'm using a gamut of activities, but I'm tying it all back into who I am, and the services
mm.
and my belief in marketing. I'm not just ranting and raving about something, right? It has to tie back into me. And so from that standpoint, I'm building what I call thought leadership.
Right.
And so I've got either customers or prospects. I actually currently have LinkedIn pursuing me to participate in a lot of their questions and writings and things like that. Why? Because I'm showing them that I'm active and that I believe in the platform, and
Right.
and then putting out content that people are enjoying or reading or benefit from. It's about education. I would say that the mistake some people make is it's all about me, 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 me. Look at me, I'm great. Who cares, right? It's more about
Right.
giving insights, people to get ideas and concepts and the value you can bring or you are bringing to them, that they can implement. And so that's kind of my aspect. I do go on Facebook, I do go on Instagram, but my fishing pond is LinkedIn.
I love it. No, I think you explained this really well about like how you have sort of like went on with different types of content and like use this, and like you have a strategy around it. It's not just like posting random things, but like you have a, how do you not make it about yourself, but you're solving someone else's problem. So this is great. And I want to double click on all of these things, especially like your personal journey. But before that, like one question around just this, when it comes to like companies that you either work with or like advise, do you see that currently companies seeing this as like an effective marketing strategy that they are investing in, or is this taking off? Is this like already been there for a while, or how are people seeing this idea of using social media, especially building thought leadership and brand? How are people seeing this? Is this seen as an effective growth strategy?
Part of it's about education and setting expectations of the people that you're working with. I've been involved with companies and it's like, we did, pay-per-click ads. They never worked, never want to do it again. SEO didn't work. I tried it for a month, and because they don't understand and they're not necessarily getting, the best advice, because, and then not to criticize my marketing brethren, but their job is to sell programs. But at the end of the day, I have a client in the tech world and it's like, oh, we need to run, PPC ads. And I'm doing searches on volume searches. It's like, nobody's searching for this topic. So the ads aren't going to do me any good. I need to invest it. I need to build relationships. I need to drive more interest in it. And I can't really do that by, advertising per se. There's so many other ways to build that thought leadership. So I'm a real believer in analyzing the competition. Where are they? I just went through this with a manufacturing company. At the end of the day, none of their competitors are on Facebook. They're not on Instagram. Right. So that's just telling me they don't believe, as I don't believe, that our client, who's an engineer, is looking for their services on those channels. But they are looking for LinkedIn, right? For me, it's the website, is your calling card,
Right.
and then they're going to go to LinkedIn. And the messaging need to tie together. I've seen one message on your website and a different message on your LinkedIn, and there's a disconnect, right? So there has to be some consistency. So and then based on that, it's a combination. You just can't do posts. Posts have to visually communicate. It needs to be a message. I like video. We know people watch videos. I'm seeing a huge uptick in pictures, still pictures.
Right.
People are really liking the pictures. So I've been adding that into the strategies. Now, to answer the rest of your question, though, a client will say, "Hey, I've done this for 6 months and it hasn't generated me any money." And I said,
Right.
but look at the foundation of this is not necessarily to, tie a direct dollar amount to your organic activity.
Right.
It's about, do they know about you? Are you driving them to the website? If we're doing consumer stuff, we could do attribution models and all of that. It's a little more difficult in the B2B world. So you can't say, hey, they came in through here and they went to there and they did this and led to a sale. If the sale's $1 million, that's not a credit card sale, right? So it's really about setting those expectations and understanding. I have a client in an industry where they really weren't doing anything when I got involved with them. And, they're tickle pink because they probably 4 times their followers. They've got people, the CEO's getting phone calls. Hey, I saw your stuff, and he's getting on speaking panels and doing videos, and can he tie it to a specific ROI yet? Not yet. We've been at it 6 months, but the fact is his credit, if you will, his cachet went up because he's getting exposure that he didn't have before.
I like it. I think you mentioned really well about how you have to like tie this in with your audience. Where are your audience? And you need to make that. That's one of the very, very clear criteria that like their audience are going to be here. They're consuming content in this space. Then you need to create content in this space and then establish your thoughts. That makes sense. Are there other things that you would say would make this a good fit for an organization? Say, for example, you work with somebody and they ask that, like, hey, should we be investing our time, resources, and effort in these kind of social media? I know that like our audience come to social media. Is that an immediate yes, or is there more reasons or more criteria that you would say would make it a better fit for your organization?
Well, again, I look at, I go back to the competition, and if possible, I like to talk to their customers, or at least get some information. Talk to one of their customers. Simply put, when you're looking for a resource, where did you turn? Right? And guarantee the first place is going to be the website. But then where do they go? Right? They see Angelo Ponzi is on the website. Now they want to see who I am, and then they go to LinkedIn. Right? They're not going to go to Facebook to see who I am or anyplace else. So there has to be that connection and understanding where they're going and what are they doing, what's their behavior, and take out this aspect, but think about their human behavior, their behavior, and how do they seek out and find, evaluate information to make a decision. You and I go out and buy laundry detergent. That's a different process and behavior, right? I'm coming at it with, hey, my mom used Tide, I'm going to use Tide, right? But my mom didn't use a technical widget in a computer, right? So that decision to what software or what circuit boards I'm going to integrate with, or which it's a different process. And now you're dealing with multiple levels. You're dealing with a hierarchy of people making decisions, and you have to be in a sense communicating to each one of those levels, which that one size fits all doesn't work for me anyway. I don't believe it works. If I'm in finance, I want to know the value I'm going to get. If I'm in engineering, I want to understand how it's going to integrate. If I'm in purchasing, I want to understand the value. I want to know that I can get it. I'm not going to buy it and then find out it's going to take 6 months to get it. So, all that kind of integration of message becomes extremely important, and then finding the right channel, right? If I'm talking to somebody in their, I'll say 60s or 70s, they still like the whole paper. They want paper. They want to see a case study. They want to see a white paper. You talk to somebody in their 20s or 30s, they're watching videos. And so again, having the right types of communications strategies based on the audience that you're talking to.
I like it. So that the audience fit, and then there is the fit with the messaging that comes through, and then also like using competitors is a great way to identify whether this makes sense or not. I love all that part. Tell me a little bit more, because most of the time when you start about thinking about like social selling, you are thinking that you're trying to build a brand, not just about the company and the brand, which is something that happens, but these days it's a lot about like an exec or like the founder themselves, like the human and the authenticity of the content that they produce is starting to become more valuable, especially in the context of social selling. It's not from the company's social media page, but more from like each individual social media page. Is this something that it makes perfect sense for like a solopreneur, like like someone who's running consulting or so, because they are the face of the business and it makes sense. But for larger organizations, manufacturing, everything, is this becoming a thing where like the leaders in that space are starting to present themselves as like thought leaders in social media, as well as like keynotes and talks and everything?
I think so, because especially as leaders, or new leaders, I'll say, in a sense, that have grown up with this, versus somebody in their whatever 60s, 70s that's been running a company. They don't totally understand it. And that's a broad statement, so nobody yell at me or send me that negative emails. But it's I find that ultimately any business, especially a private business, not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
public, but a private, there is a leader. There's somebody who started it. There's someone who's that thought leader. And if I've grown up with you and I understand you, I want to hear from you. We not somebody else in the organization. I want to be able to pick up phone and call the CEO. So I can't say categorically I see it, but I do see it. I do recommend it, especially again, smaller businesses, but the medium size and larger, a medium size, yes, but as they get bigger, I think that it relies on maybe the frontline people and not necessarily the C-suite of people. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But again, who's that thought leader? Who's going to be the person that represents the company? And
Right.
so from that standpoint, and again, it might not necessarily always be through a social post. It might be through videos. It might be sitting on panels, capturing that video and leveraging that video, right? And to shows you're active in the industry, you're a thought leader, you're sitting with in the associations. So it gets beyond, because it all gets tied back. You sit on a panel at your industry association, they shoot video, they put it on Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever it happens to be. You're getting exposure. You're not necessarily doing it. So now you're getting a third party recommendation, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think like you said that really well, where it comes to, there are like some people who think that like I want to just not be the face of the business, but like these days people who are growing with social media are like understanding the power of being the face of the business, especially the early stage startups where like you're not yet public, you're not yet even like big enough, so you have to be the face of the business. um Tell me a bit more about, like, do you see any like sort of downsides or anything that is stopping people from doing this? It's like, I won't do this, or like my company wouldn't do this because of these reasons, and those are good reasons. Have you seen anything?
The time I see people that would like to do it are in organizations that are highly regulated. Like I have friends in the
Mm,
banking industry, right? They would love to be posting every day, but they can't.
mm,
They're waiting for the approved, sanctioned post to come down, from their parent company. I think as long as again, you're focusing, you understand your message. I believe in planning. Like all my stuff is planned 30 days
right,
ahead for whether it's me or my
right.
clients, because I don't want to be scrambling. I want to go through the approval. I want to make sure everybody understands what we're going to say. And I think that's where potentially maybe somebody would get off kilter a bit if they're just not thinking their messaging through. I remember earlier on
Mm,
in when social media was kind of really ramping up, I remember a story that a PR friend told me where the CEO of a pretty significant company decided he was going to start doing this, and he went on whatever one of the channels and started talking about all the stuff that was literally what was going on, like all the secrets and stuff. He just wasn't thinking. He
right.
was just trying to make a point and prove that he was in the know and had great stuff to say. But the problem was he was actually sharing stuff he shouldn't have said. So I think, again, back to that clear message, and if you're medium or larger company, if you want to go become the face, then rely on the professionals to make sure that what you're saying is correct. Like everything that we publish for clients comes from the client. Even though we did it, it comes from the
Right.
client, right? And so we're building their reputation, not our reputation, but we're building it for them. And I think that's the same thing as you go up the channel, to make sure that in the medical field and things like that, I mean, you have to be really careful what you say and all those kinds of things,
Yeah.
especially if public company. So anyway.
That's a very good point. I think there is the regulation part of it, and then there's also like a good idea to have a bit of a filter slash buffer between like when things are produced to when things are released. So it's not really, I mean, like there is some benefit in like being as trending and as close to like real cutting edge as possible, but it always is better to have go through a vetting process so it gets released, and you're not sort of shooting yourself in the foot. This is great. So I want to shift gears and like talk a little bit about like your personal journey itself, right? Like I know that like you built a following, and you mentioned in the beginning that you've gone through a meticulous process. You create your content ahead of time, and like walk us through like when did you decide that like you were going to build a brand around yourself, build that thought leadership? When did that start for you?
So I just had my 10th year anniversary with this
Okay.
company. But when I started it, actually wasn't named Craft. It was named, it was a little more focused on market research called Strategic Market Intelligence.
Mm,
And when I made the pivot from maybe emphasizing more research versus using research in my marketing efforts and, created the new brand, it was right about then. So maybe 7 years ago. And part of that
got it.
is, hey, this is what I recommend for clients. This is the process. And, I need to get known. People knew me as the research guy originally,
Mm,
um, even
mm,
though it was just a skill set. And so I had to pivot. I had to change the way people looked at me and thought about me. And so part of that was using these channels to change the perception of,
mm,
again, what services I offered. So instead of research being, the service, now it was just one of the services, and how I leverage
mm.
that, through my process. And so yeah, about 7 years ago, and
Yeah.
you had some ups and downs in the flow. Used to do a lot more videos than I do now. Now we're actually using clips. We're doing
Mm,
through a whole series of clips from public speaking events. I did a lot of public speaking prior to COVID.
mm,
COVID kind of killed that, so a lot of online stuff. But now we're building more video again. We run a couple blogs a month. We have newsletters. We have um, uh, now I'm doing public speaking again. I'm doing podcasts. Um,
mm.
Again, how can I get out and get my message out there? But
Right.
ultimately educate, or educate people that are starting off and want to think about the right way to go.
Okay. So 7 years back, you started this journey again, many ups and downs. I think one of the big goals for you was to change the perception of not being seen as the research guy, but like you're broader than that, and you're like presenting like a more wider uh, service that you're offering there. Tell me more about the audience there. Like, were you always like catering to like a specific segment of the audience? Did you niche and like say that like I'm gonna like focus on just these types of people? How did you pick what is the person who you're talking to, or whether it's video or who you're creating these content for?
Sure. Um, so no specific niche, because of my journey. I have a broad B2B and B2C background, and I've
Right.
worked with widgets and SaaS products, manufacturing. But I've worked with ice cream and alcoholic beverage and apparel and shoes, and so very broad. Um, I would say that in understanding, I more picked a niche of revenue on the B2B side.
Mm,
On the B2C side, it could be very different, right? You could be a $200 million company and still only have 5 or 6 people. So, right.
right.
So it gets very different. So I tend to focus on revenue a bit more. And part of the cap on my revenue is at some point in time, they're going to have somebody like me and they're not going to hire
Mm,
me, right? I used to spend a lot of time with startups over the years. Then I kind of moved that up. So I say, $3, $5 million on the low end, and then, whatever happens to bear on the other.
got
And,
it.
and then
Got
my
it. That
audience, in my audience, not public companies, all private. And I'm after the CEO,
the
president, the owner, because they're the ones going to make the decision. I'm not going to approach marketing because, again,
right.
that's the fox in the hen house. So maybe a
Mhm.
CFO, maybe a COO, but mostly after the senior leadership.
Got it. So that's like your ICP. Makes sense. That lines up with like who you're going to be selling into your business as well. So like you're creating content for them as well. So maybe like, walk us through that content creation process and also tell us how that's evolved over time. Like you said, like you've done videos and everything over the past. What is kind of the mindset shift, right? Like, how many hours do you dedicate per week to like say, I'm going to spend some time in like doing this? Or like is this all coming naturally? Do you have a method to this content creation process? Walk us through that.
Um, so it all goes back to what we're offering and the value that we can
Mm,
bring. And so
right.
we tend to think from there, right? I talk a lot about competitive analysis. So we write blogs about competitive analysis. We do posts on competitive. I have an ebook on competitive analysis. I've done videos on competitive analysis. I've given talks on competitive analysis. So I tend to go through of focusing on things that are relevant to my business, but that you can get value for. Now, I'm not, for example, I'm not an SEO guy. I understand it. I'm dangerous, right? I know enough to be dangerous, but I worked for a luxury goods company for about last year, and the founder was, I mean, he was an SEO fanatic. I mean, he said to me, it was for a luxury watch company, and he said to me when I first started, "Who do you think my customer is?" I said, "Well, the watches are expensive. You could either buy a car or buy a watch. So it's got to be somebody with a lot of discretionary money." And he says, "No, my number one customer is Google." I thought about it and I said, okay. Well, over the period of time, I understood what he was talking about. I saw what was happening. And so after that engagement, I actually went on a speaking engagements and blogs all about Google as your number one customer. Now, is a primary service SEO that I offer? No, it's, another arrow in the quiver, but I felt it was as important that people understood the power, that it just doesn't, there's not, you run SEO today or you run a blog and then, it doesn't generate tons of money, and people get disillusioned very quickly. And so to really, I said this earlier, set those expectations, get them to understand the process, get them to understand that it takes time to build that following and to get those, followers and, likes and all that. That's wonderful. But I want followers. I want people connecting with me, right? I want people asking questions. And so by doing it that way, if they see an article, let's say I'm competitive, and then they go to my website, they have other tools there that talk about competitive, and I can start to get reinforced that idea that I'm expert in competitive analysis. And so that's kind of my content strategy. I do deviate, during that pandemic, I was writing about, I forget, sweatpants, with, journeys and stuff like that. So, I mean, but it all tied back to business. Everything I write is tied back to business. I had a meeting with a law company once, lawyers, and the guy says, I don't believe in branding. That's all about the lawyers I have on staff. That's for my revenue. And I said, but when they leave, they take their name off the wall. I said, what's your brand? He said, I don't need a brand. And I literally came back and wrote an article and did a video on why I don't need branding. And I didn't mention any names, but so I look for those kinds of educational things that this guy just didn't understand. And so that's really the focus on that content is what's important, what's going on. For clients, we look at industry sites, what are the trends, what are happening. We have conversations, obviously, with the owners, what's hot this month, where's the business going, what are something I don't know, we can start writing about and promoting. So very tied into the journeys of the businesses and where they want to go, how we're going to get there, and making sure that everything we put out supports the growth effort. Really, it's all about business growth.
I like that. Yeah. So I think the kind of content that you produce, it's like, I think you gave a lot of great tips around like how you figure that out, and like how do you make it like very relevant and like make sure that it's adding value, right? Like the emphasis, I think the underlying current seems like, how can you add value over here but there's one concern that like people have in that, am I just spending too much time on this? Is this something that like it takes a lot of time to like create these, research this, and then like create the content for this, write it, original thought, record the video, all of these things. So maybe tell us about your process. How many hours do you dedicate for doing this part of it in a week, or like is there like a schedule that you go through for something like this?
So I have some people on my team that help me, but I would say me personally, I bet you 5 hours a week, 6 hours a week.
Yeah.
And then, I have a process of using Sales Navigator to identify potential prospects, and I go through a nurturing process. So, but
Right.
that's only, 15, 20 minutes in the morning that I do that every day.
Right.
And then, and I think, if I added everybody's time up and stuff, in the course of the month, we probably spend between us all 15 hours, 20 hours, maybe. So it's a lot of time to put it
Okay.
together, right? Because you got to research it,
Right.
create it, proof it,
Right.
schedule it,
Right.
building the email campaigns, newsletters, whatever it happens to be. That stuff doesn't just materialize.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And when it comes to, and I think like we're kind of towards the end of this show, and so I want to like ask from the perspective of like say early stage entrepreneurs or early marketing teams, like you don't have a big marketing team, you don't have too many people like helping you with creating content, and you're trying to like still do this part of it. And what would you recommend for them as to like how should they go about with their whole thought leadership building? What is the lowest bang for the buck, like where they can actually like invest their the smallest amount of time and get the most benefit? Well, what's your recommendation?
Well, I was going to say this in the last segment, but I'll say it here. I think a mistake that small businesses make is the owner wants to be the one that's writing. The owner wants to be the one that's doing this. And if they're doing that, they're not working on their business, they're working in it. So if they have
Mm,
a small team or a creative person that can take their vision or their goals, a lot of freelancers out there that can turn the content, they can approve it, edit it. But content creation, staring at a blank page, I don't care how much you write, staring at a
right,
blank page is a blank page. And, you're searching for that spark, and that takes time. So you think if,
right,
you're going to write a blog a week, which I personally don't encourage, but if you do, I mean, how much time? If that's 3, 4, or 5 hours out of your day, meantime, you should be out selling or, doing your operations, streamlining your finances, not crafting blogs or creating posts. And I think that's again where I've seen in the past where small companies, they kind of ends up with, the owner wanting to do stuff or the senior people instead of, again,
right,
utilizing their teams or utilizing outside resources to get it done. Because I mean, even me, I mean, I say I have a team that works with me. Sometimes I do it. A lot of the times I'm given the direction and the vision, communicating what I want, and then we're going back and forth versus I'm not the one having to sit there for 3 or 4 hours doing it.
I like it. And I want to also like double click on that a little bit to say that how do you draw the balance between making sure that it doesn't come off as something that is totally like done by somebody else? How do you like make sure that it's authentically you and you are presenting it, and at the same time not spending like the 6 7 hours doing all of these things? How do you draw that balance, and how do you recommend it for your clients as well?
Well, that gets back to the brand company understanding who they are, their voice, their tone,
Mm,
their characteristics, and making sure that somebody who's writing
mm,
understands those characteristics. And over time,
right.
out of the chute, it's probably not going to work. But over time, people that are working with you, for example, I mean, the people that work with me, we've been doing it a long time. They know my voice. They know what I'm trying to communicate, how I'm trying to communicate, who I am. So it gets to the point where hopefully you can't tell whether I wrote it or somebody else wrote it. And I think that's, again, it's those people say, hey, Bob, go write this. And they get it and they go, well, I wouldn't say it that way. Well, no, they wouldn't. Right. So
Right.
they got to work that it isn't Bob's writing for Bob. Bob's writing for you. And therefore he
Mm,
has to understand your tone, your voice. And I think that happens over time. And again, companies have to understand it takes time. It just doesn't happen overnight. And if
yeah.
you accept that, then I think you can have successful programs. If you're looking for a quick hit, I can't tell you how many times I'll get into a client and say, yeah, we ran, paid, or we did social, it never worked. The blogs didn't work. We had to rewrite them all the time, and they're picking on the agency. And I turn to them and say, I think it's your fault.
Mm. No, that makes a lot of sense. Um, no, I think I really like what you're saying is that like you are training a like ghost writers or like however you call them, but like people who are your team that would be able to, like, I mean, everybody does this, even in like show business, like people have like writers, or like if not one, like dozens of writers, like helping them come up with like the best things over there. But still people deliver it with like the authenticity of it, whether it's on video, whether it is on like content when they're writing it makes perfect sense over there. This has been great. Angela, I think we're went like a little bit over time over here, but like I was just engrossed in like all the very takeaways that you were sharing with our audience, and this has been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for spending the time and sharing all your insights there.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Thank you.